Hello and welcome. This is Pranava Rao. This video is a part of series of setting up penetration testing or hacking lab in a safe environment to test your hacking scenarios or penetration testing on a virtual machine. Just a side note, do not hack something that you don't own or have permission to. That's the reason it's important to set up your own virtual environment to test out your hacking skills and tactics. In this video, we'll be going through in downloading, installing and configuring Windows 10 virtual machine on a hypervisor. In our case, we'll be using VMware Workstation Pro.
Firstly, we need an ISO image of Windows 10 operating system. An ISO image can be assumed as a DVD or a optical drive which was used to connect to a computer and install an operating system. Here, we'll be using the ISO image which has a configuration of installing the Windows 10 operating system on a hypervisor. Secondly, we need a hypervisor to install the virtual machine on. There are many hypervisors. You can use VMware Workstation. There are two in VMware Workstation, that is the VMware Workstation Player, which is the free edition, and VMware Workstation Pro, which is the paid edition. There are other hypervisors such as Oracle VM VirtualBox or Proxmox and so on. I'll create a separate video talking about hypervisors, its features and functionalities in a different video. But just you know that any hypervisor you choose, the configuration and installing of the operating system will be same. Just the configuration of the virtual environment might change. In this case, we'll be using VMware Workstation Pro to configure our virtual machine. And this is it. We are good to go if we have these things in our bucket list. First, we need to get an ISO image of Windows 10 operating system. For that, you can go to Microsoft website and you'll find an executable file which is going to download an ISO image. Come down here and download the software. So once the software is downloaded, run the executable file. So once it loads up, it's going to give us a license agreement page. Click on accept, then select the option to create installation media. Next, then the language architecture and edition. Now, depending upon your system architecture, select either 64-bit or 32-bit operating systems architecture that you want to choose for your ISO image. Now, if you're not sure of which architecture you are running, you can open up your settings and in system under about, you'll find a system type. Now, choose this carefully and move on next. Select the ISO file and give it a location where you would like to download the ISO file and let it download. It's going to depend on your internet speed. You can pause this video and come back once your ISO file is downloaded. Hopefully, after a successful download of the ISO file, open VMware Workstation and in here, click on Create a new virtual machine. This gives up with the two options, either to configure it in a typical manner or manually. I'll choose the custom one, then click on Next, Next. And if this is the first time that you're selecting an ISO image, you might have to click on Browse, then go to Downloads, select your ISO image file, and then Open. Then click on Next. I'll name my virtual machine as Windows 10 and assign a different location to it to be stored. Also, create a folder for it. Next, firmware type, I'm going to choose it as BIOS. This is the processor for your virtual machine. You can give up to how much ever CPU cores you have in your system, but I'll go with the default. So next, this is the RAM for your virtual machine. I recommend minimum of 2 GB of RAM for your virtual machine. But in my case, I'll give up to 4 GB. Then click on next. Since I don't want any network connection on internet to be provided to my virtual machine till I do the initial configuration, I'm going to choose on do not choose a network connection. Then next, go with the default for the IO controller. Next, A disk type 2 is default. Since we are installing this virtual machine for the first time, select the option Create a Virtual Disk. I'll be covering all these other options in a separate video about hypervisors, but just so that you know, you have other option of using an existing virtual disk. Imagine you have downloaded a virtual machine and want to use its disk as a disk for this new virtual machine that you're creating. You can use this option, or you can use your physical hard disk as a virtual disk for your machine. In our case, just click on create a new virtual disk. Then 60 GB of storage for the virtual machine is fine for me. If I want more, we can increase it later on. And I'm going to choose store the virtual disk as a single file. Then next, that's default next. And that's it. Click on power on the virtual machine after creation. Then click on finish. Now let it do its configuration and booting up the virtual machine. Once the virtual machine starts, we get a new screen to select language, the time and keyboard format. So I'll click on next, then install now. Since I don't have any activation code or product key of Windows 10, select the option I don't have a product key. Then any version of Windows 10, depending on your preferences. I'll go with Windows 10 Pro. Next. Accept the license term agreement. Next. Custom install Windows only. Then the only driver that you have. Next. And that is it. This will install Windows 10 on our virtual disk. Let it install. We can come back once we see the setup screen for Windows 10. Okay, now that our Windows 10 is installed, we just have to give us some information for it for the setup to be completed. I stay in India. Next. Your keyboard layout. Next. Yes. Since I don't use any other keyboard layout, I'll skip. Now, initially I had not selected any network adapter. That's the reason I don't see up any network adapters in here. So I'll click on I don't have internet. Then continue with limited setup. Who's using this PC? Just assign a username for the user account. Then next, a super memorable password. I can only remember password at 123. Some security questions. I don't want any of these services and privacy settings to be turned on. That's the reason turn everything off and then click on accept. We don't even want Cortana to be installed in this machine. So that is it. Let it do its stuff and give the desktop interface for us to work on. The first thing that I do once I get this interface is to install VMware tools. Now you can see this down here in the option to install tools. Just in case if you have clicked on other option to remind you later, you can click on VM and then install tools. Here, open up File Explorer, then go to this PC, and in here we can see a DVD drive which has VMware tools in it. Double click that. Yes. And this will give us a wizard to configure the VMware tools. Click on Next. And in most cases, the typical install is more than enough for the workstation to work fine. This installs all the drivers and Bluetooth connections that we need for USB and other functionalities. So click on Install. So once the tool is installed, click on Finish. Don't reboot it yet. We have some configurations to do before rebooting it. So open up Settings. Under Settings, go to System, then in System, go to About, and click on Rename this PC. I usually like to rename my virtual machines so that I be specific with it on why it is being used. I'll name this as Victim 1. Okay, then Next, and then restart it. So once the system is rebooted, log in with the user credentials and then power off the virtual machine. The reason that I'm powering off this virtual machine is that I want to take a snapshot of this virtual machine. Just in case in the future I mess something up with this virtual machine, I'll have a fallback place where I can start working on with the virtual machine again. So go here, right click, then select the option snapshot, take a snapshot. I'll name this as just installed, then click on take snapshot. So you can see here it has come up as snapshot just installed. Now is when I'll add a network interface or a network adapter to this virtual machine. So click on edit virtual machine settings, then add, go to network adapter, finish. So here I get an option as NAT connection. It's usually okay in others cases. In my cases, I have a specific network designed for my laboratory purpose. So I'll select that with a custom specific virtual network and select my network adapter pre-configured in virtual network settings. So click on OK and then power on the virtual machine. I'll click on yes to this to be discoverable on the network. Now I want to do some network configuration. The first thing is to assign a static IP address for this virtual machine. For that, you can either go through command line interface or you can go to control panel, then under network and internet, network and sharing center, then click on the adapter which is there for your virtual machine. Then click on properties, Internet Protocol version 4. Double click on that. This is going to open up a wizard properties for configuring the IPv4 addresses. Click on use the following address. This is my network configuration, which I'll be setting up for the virtual machine. These settings might depend upon your network configuration, such as the IP range, your DNS servers, your subnet mask, etc. Subnet mask, then the default gateway, which is going to point to my router. I also have a dedicated DNS server in my network. I'm going to also point all the DNS traffic to it. Now, once you give your IP details, click on OK, OK, close, and that's it. You can open up PowerShell and you can check your IP configuration. You can see here I've got a static IP which is ending with 0.249. Now I'll update my Windows 10 virtual machine. Open settings, then go to update and security. Then you can click on check for updates. Just in my case, I have a proxy connection which I need to configure to get access to internet. Since I have a network which is air-gapped from the internet, the proxy is the only way for me to reach to the internet. I'll just configure that in soon. I'll not be explaining the steps for it. Yeah, now this will check for any updates, and if there are any update, it will update it and reboot. I'll pause the video here and I'll come back once the system is updated and rebooted.
Now that I've got my system up to date, the one last thing that I want to do is to turn off automatic update checks. For that, open up services, then go down here. You'll be able to see, let me zoom in. You'll be able to see Windows Update. Open that, properties, and properties, startup type, select to disable, then click on stop, apply, OK. So this will not let the system update by default. I don't want it to check for any updates in my lab environment. So I'll power off my virtual machine and take a snapshot of it. Now that my virtual machine has been updated and taken a snapshot, now we come to the final step of the lab. That is setting up a file share and also enabling a new user into the system. First, let's go with having a file share enabled in the system. First step, in my desktop, I'll create a new folder called sharing. Then inside that folder, I'll create a new file and name it as a user file. Inside this user file, I'll just add a random users into it, such as admin, administrator, then user 1, user 2, and save it. Inside this folder, right click, then go to properties. Here go to sharing. Then under advanced sharing, click on share this folder, apply, OK, close. So now this has enabled our file to be discoverable in the network. Now let's create a new user. Open up settings. In settings, go to account. Under account, family and other users. Click on add someone else to this PC. I don't have this person's information. Add a user without a Microsoft account. Fill in some username. Make it secure. I'll name it as password. Password. Now some security questions. What's your pet name? Okay. What's your city that you were born in? Next. So a new user is created. Come here, go to your account and sign out. Once you're logged off, open the login screen, click on new user and then enter their password. Here, turn off all the privacy settings and then click on accept. So this is the new user that we have. So that is it. Now then power this machine off and then take a snapshot of this virtual machine. So that is it for this video. So that is it for this video. Hope you enjoyed and learned something new out of this video of setting up a hacking lab. Until next time, see you. Bye.